There are leaders, and there are those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power or authority. They are appointed to a role, given a title, and tasked with managing a team. But those who lead inspire us. They are the ones who command deep loyalty, who drive innovation, and who create movements that change the world. Why is it that some people and organizations are more innovative, more influential, and more profitable than others? Why do some command greater loyalty from their customers and employees, while others struggle to retain them even when they offer the best product or the lowest price? It all comes down to one simple, yet profoundly difficult question: why? Simon Sinek discovered a naturally occurring pattern in the way the greatest leaders and organizations think, act, and communicate. It is the exact opposite of how everyone else does it. He calls it the golden circle. Most people and companies know what they do. Some know how they do it. But very, very few know why they do it. And by why, Sinek doesn't mean making money. That is a result. Why is your purpose, your cause, your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? To understand why starting with why is so powerful, we have to look at human biology. The golden circle corresponds perfectly with the structure of the human brain. The outer ring, the what, corresponds to the neocortex. This is the newest part of the brain in evolutionary terms, and it is responsible for rational thought, analytical thinking, and language. When you tell someone all the features and benefits of a product, you are speaking to their neocortex. They understand the information, but it does not drive behavior. The middle and inner rings, the how and the why, correspond to the limbic brain. The limbic brain is responsible for all our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It is also responsible for all human behavior and decision-making. But here is the crucial part: the limbic brain is not responsible for language. This is why we sometimes have a gut feeling about a decision, even when all the facts and figures point in the opposite direction. We feel it, but we struggle to put it into words. When you communicate from the outside in, starting with what you do, people can understand you, but they are not inspired by you. When you communicate from the inside out, starting with why you do it, you speak directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and you allow people to rationalize their decisions with the tangible proof you provide later. Look at Apple. If they were like everyone else, their marketing would say, "We make great computers. They are beautifully designed and user-friendly. Want to buy one?" That is communicating from the outside in. But Apple doesn't do that. They say, "Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers." They start with why. They communicate from the inside out. And because they do, people don't just buy what they make, they buy what they believe. This is why Apple was able to successfully launch MP3 players, phones, and watches. Their why was not tied to computers, it was tied to challenging the status quo, which could be applied to any product. Contrast this with Dell. Dell's original why was to be the best computer company. When they made computers, they were incredibly successful. But when they decided to expand and make MP3 players and PDAs, they failed miserably. Why? Because their why was about computers. People believed Dell made great computers, so they bought them. But when Dell said, "We make MP3 players," the market said, "No, you don't." Dell's why did not translate to other products. Apple's why did. This is the power of a clearly defined purpose. It provides a filter for every decision you make and allows you to scale into new markets without losing your identity. When organizations do not have a clear why, they resort to manipulation to drive behavior. There are many manipulations in business: price drops, promotions, fear, peer pressure, and aspirational messages. These tactics work. They drive short-term behavior. If you lower your price, people will buy your product. If you run a promotion, people will show up. But manipulations are expensive, they are unsustainable, and they do not build loyalty. They create a transactional relationship. The customer is loyal to the price, not to you. The moment a competitor offers a lower price, your customer will leave. Inspiration, on the other hand, comes from a clear why. It builds trust. When people believe what you believe, they will do the things you want them to do, not because they have to, but because they want to. They will pay a premium. They will forgive your mistakes. They will become your biggest advocates. There is a massive difference between repeat customers and loyal customers. Repeat customers buy from you when it is convenient or when you have the best deal. Loyal customers buy from you even when you are the most expensive, because they believe in your cause. They stand in line for hours to buy your product on launch day. They defend your brand when others criticize it. You cannot buy this kind of loyalty with manipulations, you can only earn it with inspiration. But how do you actually scale this? How do you go from a small group of believers to a mass movement? Sinek uses the law of diffusion of innovation to explain this. In any market, the population is distributed on a bell curve. On the far left, you have the innovators, making up about 2.5% of the population. Next to them are the early adopters, making up about 13.5%. In the middle is the early majority, making up 34%. Next is the late majority, another 34%. And on the far right are the laggards, the last 16%. To achieve mass market success, you must cross the chasm. The chasm is the gap between the early adopters and the early majority. The early majority is pragmatic. They do not buy into dreams or visions, they buy into proof, reviews, and guarantees. They need to know that the product works and that others are already using it. You cannot target the early majority first. If you try to sell to the masses before you have captured the early adopters, you will fail. Instead, you must target the innovators and the early adopters. These are the people who buy what you believe, not just what you make. They are the ones who see the potential in your vision before it is fully realized. They are the ones who will take a risk on you. Once you capture them, they provide the social proof that the early majority needs. The early majority will look at the early adopters and say, if they are using it, it must be good. You don't go after the masses first. You go after the believers, and the masses will follow. You need a critical mass of people who believe what you believe to tip the scales. History is filled with examples of this. Consider the race to build a flying machine in the early 20th century. There were two main competitors, Samuel Pierpont Langley and the Wright brothers. Langley had everything going for him. He was given $50,000 by the War Department to build a flying machine. He had the best minds in the country working for him. He had the press following his every move. He was motivated by fame and fortune. He had the resources, but he didn't have a why. The Wright brothers had none of those things. They had no money, no formal education, and no press coverage. Their bicycle shop employees had to donate their time to help them. But the Wright brothers had a why. They believed that if they could figure out this flying machine, it would change the course of the world. Every time they failed, they learned something new. Langley, on the other hand, was driven by the result. When the Wright brothers finally succeeded on December 17, 1903, Langley quit. He resigned from his position, returned the government's money, and never flew again. The Wright brothers succeeded because they were driven by a cause, while Langley was driven by the prize. The early adopters and the innovators followed the Wright brothers because they believed in the dream, and eventually, the whole world followed. Once you know your why, you have to protect it as your organization grows. Sinek introduces the concept of the celery test to explain how to maintain clarity, discipline, and consistency. Imagine you go to the grocery store. You buy celery, apples, chocolate milk, and cookies. What does that say about you? It just says you like snacks. Now imagine you only buy celery, apples, and skim milk. What does that say? It says you are health conscious. Your why is your filter. When you are faced with a decision, whether to hire someone, launch a product, or partner with another company, you run it through your why. If it doesn't fit, you don't do it. This creates clarity for your team, discipline in your execution, and consistency in your brand. And consistency is the absolute key to trust. If you are consistent, people will trust you. If you are inconsistent, even if you have a great why, people will see you as inauthentic. You cannot just say your why, you must prove it through your actions, day in and day out. This brings us to the ultimate challenge of leadership, the split. As organizations grow, the metrics of success, the what, often replace the original cause. The founder, who is deeply connected to the why, eventually steps down or passes away. A successor comes in, someone who is incredibly talented at managing the what, at optimizing processes, and at driving efficiency. But they don't understand the why. They start making decisions based on the numbers rather than the purpose. The organization begins to drift. The employees stop feeling inspired and start just showing up for a paycheck. The customers start noticing the shift in quality and culture. This is the split, and it is the moment when great organizations begin to lose their way. To prevent the split, the leader must be the keeper of the why. The leader's job is to look out at the horizon, to see the future, and to inspire the people in the organization to build it. The organization's job is to look at the numbers, to manage the day-to-day, and to execute the vision. Both are necessary, but the why must always lead. You must hire people who believe what you believe. If you hire someone who is highly skilled but does not share your beliefs, they will do the work for a paycheck, but they will not innovate, they will not take risks, and they will not inspire others. If you hire someone who believes what you believe, they will bring their skills to the table, and if they lack a specific skill, you can teach them. Skills are easily taught, beliefs are not. Ultimately, start with why is not just a business strategy, it is a leadership philosophy. It is about shifting the focus from what you can get to what you can give. It is about creating an environment where people feel safe, valued, and inspired to contribute their best work. Great leaders don't just have a vision, they have the courage to stand by it, the discipline to filter every decision through it, and the empathy to communicate it in a way that resonates with the human soul. Finding your why is not a one-time exercise. It is a daily practice. It requires you to look at your actions and ask yourself if they align with your beliefs. It requires you to have the difficult conversations, to say no to opportunities that do not fit, and to stay true to your purpose even when it is not the most profitable path in the short term. When you start with why, you don't just build a customer base. You build a following. You don't just manage a team. You lead a movement. And in a world full of noise, manipulation, and short-term thinking, starting with why is the only way to build something that truly lasts.